What's better in 2024? Investing in new builds or existing properties? Look, the rules are always changing. Jacinda Ardern and the Labour government, they introduced taxes that benefited new builds, but Christopher Luxon and the new national government, they're about to get rid of those. On top of that, Adrian Orr at the Reserve Bank, he wants to bring in new mortgage rules that only impact one set of investors. So today, there are 7 big differences between new builds and existing properties that you need to know before you invest. So in this video, you're going to get an honest comparison of all 7 differences. And make sure you stick around for number 7 because that's the newest and largest change yet. But before we get into those, bias alert, here at Opes Partners, we help people invest in new build properties. So there is a massive incentive for me to tell you that new builds are the best thing. Just come and see your old mates at Opes and buy through us. I'm not going to do that. This is going to be an honest review based on facts and data because here's the truth. New builds are not the right fit for everyone. I'm Ed, an economist here at Opes Partners, and this is Property Now. The first difference is the price you pay and what you actually get for it. So existing properties tend to be bigger and have more land. For the same price, a new build will be smaller and have less land. Here's an example of 2 properties you could have recently bought. So the existing property was a 1920s 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. This was in Christchurch, 400 square metres of land. You could have purchased this for about $570K. Or you could have bought a 2-bedroom new build townhouse in the same area that has 85 square metres of land. Now, even though this new build townhouse had a lower purchase price, it's more expensive because you get less house for a similar amount of money. If you were to buy a 3-bedroom new build house on 400 square metres of land, well, it would cost you more than $570K. New builds are more expensive, but you actually need less money to invest in them. Here's why. You only need a 20% deposit when you purchase a new build property. So for a $550K property, that's going to be a $110K deposit. Existing properties today, they need a 35% deposit, though the rules are about to change. So if you're watching this in a few months, you might now only need a 30% deposit. Now, if you were going to buy a $550K existing property, you need a $192,000 deposit today, or about $165K when the rules change. And if you plan to renovate, you need to have that money for that too. So add on another $50K. So you might need somewhere between $215,000 and up to $240,000 to buy an existing property, which is almost twice as much as if you want to buy a new build. The returns you get are also different, and it depends which way you want to measure your returns. So let's start with yield. Existing properties tend to get higher rental returns than new builds. Now, investors often talk about gross yields. That's just a way of measuring the amount of rent you get compared to the purchase price. Under that measure, the existing property I showed you before wins out. You could purchase it for $570K and it would rent for about $570 a week. That is a gross yield of 5.2%. With the new build I showed you before, that's going to rent out for $500 a week, but it costs $550K. So the gross yield is 4.7%. Now, of course, there are some differences in maintenance costs, but generally speaking, your existing property will have a slightly better yield and cash flow compared to a new build property. But here's the thing, not all investors say yield is the most important factor for me. Some people care more about return on investment. And that measure asks, well, how much money do I get back for every dollar I put into an investment property? And if that's what you care about, new builds will tend to be the better fit and win out. Now, why is that? Here's the thing. All properties tend to go up in value over time, but they require different deposits, so you put a different amount of money in. So let's say you've got 2 properties side by side, one's new, one's existing, both worth $600K, and over the next 15 years, they double in value. Now, both the new build and the existing property made you $600,000, but the new build only needed a 20% deposit, so you put in $120K. That means that you get a 500% return on investment, But the existing property, it still made you 600K, but you had to put in more money. You had to put in 210K. So the return on investment is 285%. Now, let's be really clear. Both properties made the same amount of money, but one had a better return on investment because you put in less money at the start. Of course, there are some other things to think about like cash flow, and you could use my return on investment spreadsheet to run your own numbers, but generally speaking, existing properties, better yield, new builds, better return on investment. And if you like learning about property in this unbiased, number-focused way, hit the subscribe button. We release new videos every Monday and Wednesday. The biggest benefit for existing properties is you can renovate them to add value. This means you can create an immediate increase in the value of your property. Let's run some numbers. Let's say you buy a property for $550K, you spend $50,000 renovating it, and by the end, it's worth $650K. So all up, you've spent $600K, but now you've got an asset worth $650K. You've made $50,000 and you can probably put your rent up too. So if you're a hands-on investor, this can be a really good way of growing your wealth. You might want to go for an existing property. You see, with a new build, it's new. You can't renovate it. But some investors don't want to be hands-on and don't care about renovating. So if you care about renovating, go for an existing property. If that's not you, go for a new build. It'll probably be the better fit. Number 5 is the difference in unexpected costs. As I said, new builds are new, existing properties can be up to 100 plus years old. So existing properties tend to have more maintenance issues as things wear out, even if it's just been renovated. So things like your hot water cylinder could be 10K, could be the roof. To replace that, almost 30K in some instances. And those are the sorts of costs that actually don't add any value to your property because people expect the hot water cylinder to work and for the roof not to be leaky. These costs often come out of the blue and are very expensive, whereas with a new build, you've got fewer of those issues. So it's more expensive, but everything's new. You've got a 10-year guarantee on the building work, and it's built to today's building code, so there will just be fewer surprises there. But remember, stick around for number 7 because that is the new and game-changing difference. The tax rules are set to change, but I need to mention them because what I'm about to say may surprise many of you. Right now, you generally pay less tax if you buy a new build compared to an existing property, but National plans to change the rules and existing properties will soon pay less tax too. Now, when the rules change, there will be a small difference temporarily between new and existing properties. Technically, new builds will have 100% deductibility. Existing properties, they'll only have 80% in the 24-25 financial year. That all sounds complicated and it sounds like it makes a big difference, but if you're buying a property with a decent mortgage, all these different rules, they won't make a noticeable difference. Your mortgage will be so high you won't pay any extra tax. But unscrupulous companies who just want to sell you a new build will make out that that difference is massive. They'll say, oh, you should definitely buy a new build and you should buy it through me because you're going to get this tax advantage for 1 year. Look, the tax differences were massive under the previous government, but soon they won't be anymore. That doesn't mean that new builds are bad. After all, this YouTube channel is around because some of you decide to invest in new builds and choose to buy them through us here at Opes Partners. But don't believe it if someone says that you should definitely buy a new build because of the tax benefits. Very soon, those benefits will be unnoticeable. And number 7, the newest and one of the biggest differences, it's how fast you can grow your portfolio. You see, the Reserve Bank will likely introduce debt-to-income ratios, or DTIs for short, later this year in 2024. This will make it harder to take out more and more mortgages, and that's going to make it harder for investors to grow their property portfolios. But here's the thing. These new rules only apply to existing properties. New builds, they're exempt. According to some of the Reserve Bank's own modelling, if an investor already owns just one investment property, over the next 10 years, they might be able to buy 3 existing investment properties or up to 6 new builds. Now, not every investor's portfolio will be exactly like this. The Reserve Bank didn't factor in things like you can increase your rent if you renovate, but this gives you an idea of how many more properties you can buy if you invest in new builds compared to existing. But who should buy a new build and who should invest in an existing property? There are 3 questions you should ask yourself, but just before I get into that, New builds are generally a better fit for people with busy home lives, people who say things like, I'm too busy looking after the kids, I don't want to renovate an investment property. But if instead you love the smell of paint and you think, I just want to get my hands dirty, I want to add value, existing properties will be the better fit for you. So here are the 3 questions to ask yourself if you're on the fence. The first is, which returns do I care about? Do I care about return on investment, in which case new builds win out? Or do I care about gross yield, in which case go for an existing property? The next one is, can I afford an existing property? Remember, they take more money to get started. So some of you might only be able to afford a new build. And the last one is, do I want to renovate or do I want a hands-off investment? If you want to renovate existing property, hands-off investment, go for the new build. Now, here's the truth. You can be successful whether you choose to invest in new builds or existing properties. It's about finding the right strategy that works for you. And if you want to invest in new builds, check out our website, opespartners.co.nz. We help regular Kiwis grow their wealth through new build investment properties.